Hi Ffion, thank you for joining today in the interview. My name is Danais Bantu. I'm a young Steiner for 2025 and I followed the session on women's health yesterday, and we would like to make some questions with you. So we have together Ffion Jones from DSW, and maybe I would like to start with the point that also MEP Sipra Pietikainen did in the session yesterday. So she mentioned the interest group of women's health that is now established in the European Parliament, and also a hope for an EU strategy on women's health. This has long been also supported by the civil society. So what are your thoughts about it, and what you would like to see if there was such a document? And also if you could tell us a bit, what actions would you expect from the interest group?
Okay, well, thank you very much for the welcome and for discussing women's health. So indeed, there are calls for an EU women's health strategy, and we are one of those civil society organisations that are calling for it. One of the main reasons we are calling for it is so that we can have a more coordinated approach to closing the gender health gap or to advancing women's health at the EU level. The EU, of course, has many roles in its arsenal in terms of closing the gender health gap in the health area, but also in terms of research, in terms of employment, in terms of education. And so we see the EU both as a convener of its member states, but also as a global actor, very well positioned to close the gender health gap that we see globally. I would invite those listening to take a look at a report or a paper that the European Policy Centre published recently. We're very happy to contribute to that, and that has a very comprehensive list of actions that we would like to see. At DSW, we're really focused on the research gap. So we know that there is a persistent data and research gap when it comes to women's health. I'm sure many people have seen some of these statistics in terms of women not being included in clinical trials until very recently, the fact that we're not looking at sex and gender in early research, in animal studies, for example, and also this huge funding gap in terms of women's health. We know that there is particularly a low investment in issues that affect women exclusively. And so for us at DSW and our focus on research and innovation, we'd love to see a shift there, to see a more comprehensive approach to funding research and innovation from the EU, looking at sex and gender across research and innovation, requiring the reporting of sex and gender disaggregated findings, to look at more inclusive clinical trials, and to put dedicated money on the table for women exclusive conditions.
Absolutely. You mentioned coordination and better approach and addressing the gap. And I know recently you posted an article about the missed opportunities we had in some EU legislations and ongoing revision of the general pharma legislation on addressing these women issues. Do you think that an EU strategy could find any synergy in these recent upcoming legislative efforts? And what do you think also in relevance to the EU Biotech Act or the Life Science? Is there a window of opportunity to address this gap there?
Absolutely, exactly what you're saying. I think we really have a crucial window of opportunity now, not just in terms of the legislation that's on the table and the initiatives that are currently being discussed, but also, of course, we have the proposal for the next budget, the next long-term EU budget, the multi-financial framework or the MFF on the table. So the strategy would indeed serve to ensure that we are looking at, let's say, women's health in all policies. We talk a lot about health in all policies, and I think we need to really be thinking about women's health in all policies. And so the Biotech Act is somewhere where we think that the EU has scope to close some of these topics, particularly in relation to clinical trials. I think there's also a lot of opportunity as well to further invest in femtech. So we have a lot of disruptive technologies coming through in the women's health space as well. And so the aim of such a strategy would be to coordinate these efforts so we can make sure that we are not seeing more missed opportunities to close the gender health gap. I think that I'm always aware of the fact that women were only mandated to be included in clinical trials by the US, historically one of the largest public funders of health research, until 1993, so just over 30 years ago, showing my age. And I think we really cannot sit and not act now and wait another 30 years before we really start to see concrete and real change on women's health. And so that's why we're calling for this strategy.
Indeed, it's a very important timing now and offers some opportunities. And I think at the same time that we want more research and data on women, maybe we also want more women scientists doing this research. Do you think that this could actually have also a benefit on the swifting interests, and then also having in mind the discussions we have now on competitiveness, like in her State of the Union speech, Ursula von der Leyen talked about it, and it's been in the heart of the discussions in Brussels and outside Brussels for long now, and also these few days in Gastein. What can we do in the field of competitiveness? Can we invest more in research and innovation on women's health? Can we have a boost there?
So to the point of women in science, absolutely. We know from research when we have more diverse research groups, when we have women in research positions, and particularly in research leadership positions, they are more likely to consider issues that affect women, but they're also more likely to consider intersectionally issues around sex, gender, age, race. So we know that women play a very pivotal role as researchers in ensuring more inclusive science. Undoubtedly, and this is a call that we at DSW have been making for years. And I would give a shout out to the European Research Council, for example. They have recently been very vocal about how they are really thinking about these things in the research that they fund, and highlighting that, you know, we need the brightest minds across all genders, across all pillars of society to ensure that we have science that delivers for everyone. So absolutely, and we will continue that call. Now, to the competitiveness question, of course it is the word on the street of Brussels, let's say. And I think we have to be really careful in considering health in the competitiveness agenda. It is undoubtedly a foundational block to a competitive society, but we also have to question competitiveness for what means and for what future. Health is fundamentally a human right, and for us as a global health NGO, for me as an individual, advancing health is always about securing everyone's human rights. But we also know, the literature is extensive about how healthy populations result in more healthy economies, more competitive economies and societies, if you like to use that language. If we are to look particularly at some of the issues that affect women exclusively, endometriosis, for example, has been shown to keep women out of work dramatically. We also see delay in diagnosis, delays of treatment, also resulting in women not being able to be as active as they want economically, let's say. Also the menopause is another classic example of where we are losing women from the workforce, let's say, at a time where they are maybe, post-children, later into their careers, really at a time where they want to be giving their all to their careers, for example. And so I think there is an element of investing in closing the gender health gap delivers on healthier and more productive economies, but also making Europe a epicenter, let's say, of women's health, especially given the changes that we've seen afoot in other parts of the world, is also an economic opportunity. And so certainly, if we are to invest in a number of these technologies that are missing for women all over the world, we can place Europe in a very competitive position to deliver better health for people and better health for our societies and economies as well.
Absolutely. Investing on women's health can be very beneficial also for the society and the individuals themselves. And there was also this research that was done by McKinsey, the Health Institute, on a 2024 report about closing the women's health gap. And they demonstrated exactly how much economy would benefit by giving the boost and investing more in women. So they were confirming what you just said now. And of course, you can develop more if you have any thoughts on that. And just in relevance with that, I also wanted to ask you, in connection with having more women also giving the scientific view, you mentioned in your speech yesterday in the intervention that we would need also an expert group of women by the Commission being established to help also and give their advisory opinion. So why do you think we need such an expert group?
Sure, I can answer to that. So from the economics that you say, the numbers from McKinsey, so yes, they estimate that closing the gender health gap could provide $1 trillion a year to the world economy by 2040. So no, these are substantial numbers, and so it's not just about being the morally right thing to do, it's also the economically smart thing
Profitable,
to
yes.
do. Exactly. And then to the expert group on research and innovation, it links back a little to that work that's been going on globally in terms of looking at where are the big gaps for investment, where are the big breakthroughs in research, which innovations make sense to push through the pipeline to have the greatest impact in terms of closing the gender health gap. And the reason we're calling for an expert group on women's health research and innovation is we certainly can celebrate the investment that the European Commission has made in women's health. Earlier this year, they announced that they had funded $2 billion worth of research across 1,000 projects relating to women's health in the current research framework programme and the one prior, so Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. Now this of course is to be celebrated, but when one looks at those projects, they're coming from lots of different funding instruments, they're funding lots of different things, and so we see that an expert group could really bring together expertise from the private sector, civil society, researchers in Europe and experts globally as well, to make sure that the funding is really driving the greatest impact. And so in putting together this expert group, the EU can drive efficiencies and synergies across its different investment instruments, including its external action instruments as well. The EU has committed to a global health strategy, has committed to the Sustainable Development Goals, and is a strong global leader on global health as well. And so such an expert group can make sure that the EU is looking internally and externally to drive the greatest efficiencies, synergies, and therefore impact through its different investment channels, let's say.
Thank you for that, because you make the perfect link with the final questions I wanted to make to you. Also to connect it with our forum here and the theme of the forum, Rethinking in Solidarity in Health. What can EU do more to help in a global level and to address maybe the inequalities and disparities we have among different member states or different groups among member states? So we can see that low-income women, they have many different challenges when it comes to health. So what can EU do on a global level maybe?
Oh, big question. So I think I would refer back to a comment that I made yesterday on the panel and referring to the State of the Union address that Commission President Ursula von der Leyen gave recently, calling on the EU to step up where others have stepped down when it comes to health and particularly to global health. We have seen the Trump administration push back on women's rights, and this is a global phenomena that we're seeing. And this is not just in relation to sexual and reproductive health and rights, this is also to inclusive science and excellent science. Most people have heard about the Control-Alt-Delete approach to getting rid of any mention of women or sex or gender in the research that the US is funding. And so this has huge implications for women's health and for the health of broader societies globally, because we know that healthy women equal healthy families, healthy societies and healthy economies. And so I think we would call on the EU in its leadership position to do just that, to continue leading, to continue investing, and to do this in a way that is driving synergies across the EU, but also globally. As you mentioned, we do have a huge deal of inequality and discrepancy in health access and health outcomes across member states, but also within member states. We know challenges of rural and urban, for example. We also know that race intersects with sex and gender, as does socioeconomic status, to drive differing health outcomes. And so I think in using its leadership to convene its member states, to convene global actors as well, including those from neighbouring regions like Africa, the EU can really serve to bring together good practices. I think there's a lot to learn north to south, south to north, west to east, And so in doing that, using its convening power and its leadership, we think that the EU is well placed to really stand true to its values of equality, of democracy, and to really deliver on its agenda as well in securing the EU's competitiveness. And so we think that taking this leadership role for the EU is really a win-win for everyone.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate your input, and I will take your last words for EU to commit on their values and to continue to be the leadership on that, and also to refer back to one of the speakers from yesterday, Lisa, that she said we need not to count women but to make women count, and then what you said, that healthy women equals to healthy society. So let's hope for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.